Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and this is my wrap-up for Horror Mayhem. So welcome back to the channel, if that is the case. Yes, Horror Mayhem, what a fantastic month of reading short horror fiction that was. Yeah, the guidelines were, I think, under 250 pages, something like that, for the things to read for this, which I did stick to. Most of the stuff I read was around about 200 pages, maybe slightly less if it was a novella or a short novel, and then I read quite a few short stories as well. I will go through I'll go through in the order of the different prompts that we had for the different weeks of Horror Mayhem, the 4 different prompts, and as I go through I will show you where they fit on the bingo board for the things that I read. I didn't complete the bingo board, didn't expect to, but I didn't do bad. I think I got 3 lines, something like that. So I will pop that up as I talk through these books, these short stories, so you can see how I filled it out. So let's start then with the first book, which doesn't really fit any of the prompts, but it was a buddy read. And that was Dolly by Susan Hill, which I buddy read with the fabulous Cliff over at Cliff's Dark Gems. This fits the dolls prompt, funnily enough. Yeah, I enjoyed this more than Cliff did. Cliff really didn't like this one at all. I will link to Cliff's video in the description so you can see what he thought of it. But yeah, he didn't get on with this. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't great. It was okay, is what I'd say about it. It follows the story of 2 children who are sent to stay for the summer at their aunt's house. They are cousins. I don't think they've ever met before. A young lad and a young lass. The lad is quiet but quite polite. The girl is not. She is incredibly irritating. I will agree with Cliff on that point. Absolutely, she is absolutely horrible. But she's meant to be. But yeah, maybe a bit too far. She was particularly irritating. I think the thing that was the most successful in this, on what I felt was kind of a mediocre sort of book generally, the thing that was actually successful for me was the atmosphere, the setting and the atmosphere of it. It is set in English Fens, and I know that area a little bit, but it's the way that Hill wrote the environment evoked that sense of quite remote, quite featureless environment. Was very good. I enjoyed that, but again, that might just be because I've got some knowledge of it. In that respect, I guess you could class it as local horror. It's local to me in terms of its UK. But other than the atmosphere, and the writing was decent. Hill can write. Hill can sometimes write very well, as we'll come to in a bit. The rest of it, it was okay. It was fine. The ending I really didn't like. I don't think the ending paid off at all. I don't think it worked. So it was okay. Yeah, it was short. It was creepy, a bit creepy in parts, but it just wasn't up to much for me. I will quickly pop score up on screen. This I gave a 6.52, and it's a 3-star, I would say. It's decent enough. I'm not kind of like angry that I had to read it or anything like that. It didn't cheese me off, or I think it might have cheesed Cliff off a bit. But yeah, it wasn't anything special. It was fine. It was fine, I think is what I'd say. Okay then, so into the prompts now. So the first prompt for the first week was local horror. So I did try and find some stuff that was as local as possible to me. I am in the northwest of England. I'm on the edge of Derbyshire. And so I had a little look around on Kindle Unlimited, and found an omnibus of ghost stories. A Ghost Story Omnibus Volume 3 is the title, and the author is H.E. Bulstrode. So this is an indie published, self-published collection of stories. I read 2 out of there. The first one was The Fell Walker, which on the bingo board is going in on the folk. I think it probably counts as folk. And also cozy. It had kind of a cozy vibe to it as well. And this is a guy recounting a story told to him by a fell walker in a pub in Yorkshire, about strange happenings that the fell walker experienced, a strange encounter that he experienced whilst up on the Yorkshire Fells. I really liked this. It was, as I say, it had a cosy feel to it. It was funny, the way that the Yorkshireman, the fell walker, who's a very much a Yorkshireman, was written, was amusing, was you know, entertaining. It was a quick little story that was just I really liked the idea of it. I liked the description of the landscape, you know, the fell walker's kind of equipment and experience, and the gruffness of him. Yeah, it was a really enjoyable little story, that one. The other one that I read was Cold in Alabaster from this book, and that was set in Derbyshire, so that's my county basically. And this one goes on the bingo board under curses. And again, another quite unsettling story, quite mysterious story, about a stonemason who is hired to go and create a sculpture, an effigy essentially, of a wealthy sort of landowner's young wife. And he goes there, he works on this effigy in the church, and very odd things happen to the effigy, shall we say. I won't give anything away, but yes, an interesting one in terms of where it went, the plot of it. Both of these, I would say, certainly in terms of the writing, have a real flavour of M.R. James, and I think that's why I like them so much. I don't know anything about H.E. Bulstrode and what their background is, but I would imagine that they are influenced by that kind of antiquary horror of M.R. James. Both of these had that real feel about them, and successfully so. Not as a copy by any means, but definitely as an influence, an homage, whatever you want to call it. They were very enjoyable to me because of that, and I think they succeeded in their style, absolutely. I'm not going to put a rating for individual stories up, by the way, and I'll only rate a collection if I've finished the entire collection. So for these, I'm just going to say I enjoyed them both immensely, and I will go back and read the other stories in that collection, and then if I get to that, I will do a full review or a full wrap-up of that collection. Okay, still in the local horror, I read another couple of short stories out of a collection called Sussex Horrors. This is a collection from 3 different authors, Jonathan Broughton, Mark Cassell and Rain Hall. As I say, I read 2 out of here. The first one was one by Rain Hall, which is called Seagulls. This is going in under the killer animals spot on the bingo board. This was just good fun. This was just good fun. Anybody who's lived in a seaside town, or near a seaside town, or has stayed in a seaside town in the UK will know how obnoxious seagulls can be. They are absolute blighters. They really are. As with all animals, I have respect for them and their, kind of right to exist. But they're bloody annoying. They're little thieves. and reprobates. And this kind of plays on that, basically. And yeah, this is about a woman who's just moved into a new flat, and she's got some rather persistent, obnoxious seagulls on her windowsill. And yeah, they're not nice. Yeah, really enjoyable little story. Very short, but I had really good fun with that one. And the other one out of that book was a story by Jonathan Broughton, and that was called The Stealth of Spiders. And I've got this on the bingo board under indie horror. I couldn't find it anywhere else to kind of fit it in, but it's definitely indie horror. Yeah, this again, really enjoyable little story. This one follows a woman who is going into her deceased sister's flat to, under the pretense of helping to kind of clear it out, but actually they have had quite an acrimonious relationship because of kind of a love triangle, and she's going in to reclaim a piece of jewellery that she believes is hers. She has the right to it, and she's in kind of a block of flats, you know, a sort of I think a sort of a council block of flats, and she's riding a mobility scooter as well, and it's like kind of the battery's dying on that, and there's something obviously not right in this flat, but she is so consumed by this jealousy and this kind of you know, want for revenge, if you like, for retribution, to get this jewellery back, that she doesn't really see that something's up until it's too late. So yeah, again, another really fun little story, highly enjoyable. I will go back to Sussex Horrors and read some of the others. Both of them very, very British, very, very British, and yeah, thoroughly enjoyable. Okay then, on to week 2, which was movie horror. So I read a couple for this. The first one is 30 Days of Night, the graphic novel, by Steve Niles and Ben Templesmith. I'm putting this on the bingo board under graphic novel, funnily enough. And I'm also going to put it in under Universal Monsters. I don't know quite whether that's what's meant by Universal Monsters, but you know, Universal Monsters includes Dracula, vampires, so, and the 30 Days of Night is vampires, modern, but you know, different, but you know, still that same sort of thing. So I'm sticking it in. It's my interpretation. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really liked the movie when I saw that years ago, and had never got around to reading the comic. I just read the first one, the first 30 Days of Night. I haven't read the others that were done by Niles and Templesmith, but I will go back. I have got the deluxe edition on ebook, so I will go back and finish the others. But yeah, I really like the story. The story is good. It's fun. It's, you know, I like the premise of it. You know, it's the town in the Arctic Circle where, you know, for 30 days of the year the sun does not rise. It is darkness all day for 30 days, and so obviously that opens it up for vampires to come in and have a bit of a feast, have a bit of a party. What I really liked about this more than anything else was the art style. It's a very strange art style from Templesmith, but it lends itself really well to the story. It's very fluid. It's very it's quite surreal. It's quite misproportioned, the characters in some ways. The faces are quite odd. They're quite I don't know what the word is really. Smushy is the word that's in my head, but that's not the correct word. It's very stylized. It's very, very stylized. It's very, as I say, it's very fluid, but it's also very dynamic in the way that he draws, you know, some of the actiony bits. And the characters certainly have a humanity to them, the human characters. There's something in the eyes that I really like. And yeah, it's dark in terms of its, you know, colour, sort of tone, etc., things like that, but not so much that you can't see what's going on. I think it's really well balanced. I did rate this because this is a full book, and the rating I gave for this was a 7.5 out of 10, which is a 3.5 stars on Storygraph. Yeah, I think this was good. This was really good. I really enjoyed that. Okie dokes, then the other one that I read for movie horror was The Woman in Black by Susan Hill again. This was an audiobook, in fact, on Audible. I've put this on the bingo board as Haunted House and Ghost, so we've got a couple there. I know this story very, very well. I've seen the stage production of it when that was running in London umpteen times. I think I've forgotten exactly how many times I've seen it, and I absolutely love it. It is one of my favourite theatre experiences ever. And so I went for the audiobook, so I'd never actually read the actual text, the original text of it. Yeah, this was a really good audiobook. It wasn't just a straight reading, it did have audio like effects and stuff. It did have a soundscape with it, sound effects, etc. And that, I think personally, is kind of key to it. There are elements to the story where you do want that oral input, that oral kind of stimulus, and it made it very, very, it made it chilling. It did make it chilling. It wasn't as good as the theatre, but it was the next best thing to it for me with that, just the audio, because one of the things I loved about the theatre production was the sound design in the theatre production, and this has a good element of that, and I think that's why it worked so well for me. So absolutely a much better Susan Hill experience than Dolly, and certainly I would say if you're interested in that one, the audio is the way to go for it. I have given that a full rating because it was a full book, and I gave that an 8 out of 10 and a 4-star on Storygraph. Yeah, that one, very, very good. Couldn't listen to it just before bed though. I tried one night and had to turn it off quickly because I was in a holiday cottage and I was up on my own and I was getting a little bit spooked. But yeah, very, very good spooky, proper good spooky experience. Okay then, into week 3, and we're into classic horror. Not something I know that much about and I've read that much about in the past. So I picked a few short stories for this. First up, I picked a couple out of this collection, Tales of Mystery and Imagination by Edgar Allan Poe. I picked a couple that I've been wanting to read for a while. They are The Fall of the House of Usher, and The Pit and the Pendulum. The Fall of the House of Usher, I think I need to reread it, to be honest. I was a little underwhelmed, I think, for the amount of things that it's influenced and the amount of work that I know has kind of been written since that uses that as a kind of as a basis, if you like. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, it wasn't bad. It was quite, it was interesting. It was creepy. It was interesting to read it, but I think maybe I expected too much. Maybe I'd kind of hyped it up in my mind a little bit. But it was good, don't get me wrong, but a little underwhelmed I was with it. And then The Pit and the Pendulum, I really liked that one. I really like that one. It's good psychological. Could put that in the psychological horror bingo board slot. Yeah, just good, creepy, tense, compelling bit of psychological horror. So yeah, I'll reread that one as well because I really like the structure of that. I liked the way the story was told. And I do like Poe's writing very much in that one. The voice in that one, the voice of the character in that one, I really liked. So yeah, a couple of Poe. Then I read a manga volume, and that was H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, the first volume, adaptation and artwork by Gu Tanabe. I may be mispronouncing that, apologies if I am. This one on the bingo board is going in the cosmic, funnily enough, slot, and also the translated. I loved this. Absolutely loved it. I don't know a huge amount of Lovecraft. What I have read, I haven't been a fan of, not because of the ideas, the world building, the creatures, the weirdness. I like that, but I don't like Lovecraft's style. I don't like Lovecraft's writing. You'd lose that with this, fortunately, because obviously it's not Lovecraft's writing, it's Lovecraft's story, but it's Tanabe's adaptation of it. And with it having, obviously, it's mostly in a visual form as well, in terms of how the story is told. So I think maybe this is the sort of way for me to experience and enjoy Lovecraft stories, is in graphic novel format. Yeah, this, I mean, the artwork in this I absolutely love. Everything from sort of, you know, the facial expressions, things like that, to like sort of just the big old double page. You can see that. You know, scenes of the mountains. You know, it's a mountain expedition, which is my kind of thing. Let's face it. I like Arctic and, you know, extreme mountain expedition-y type stuff, especially when it's historic stuff. And yeah, it's you know, so it's another set of people going out to Antarctica to see what's there. You know, do some. There are a team of scientists. They're, you know, geologists, biologists, you know, engineers, scientists. You know, somebody who's invented a drill to be able to drill deep down through the ice and into the rock to kind of get more geological information, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, they discover, when they're out there, they discover this huge mountain range that is, unlike everything else around it, not covered in snow. And Professor Lake, who is the biologist, becomes somewhat monomaniacal about setting up a base at these mountains and exploring and finding, you know, finding out what this strange organism that he thinks he's found in some rock. So yeah, and it's the first volume, so it's only half the story, but I am hooked. I am absolutely hooked. I'm going to need to pick this up as soon as I've got some spare pennies to spend on it, because it's quite expensive, because it's manga, expensive in my world anyway. So yeah, it was just so compelling. I just picked it up and it's just like, right, okay, now I was into it straight away and just read it in one sitting easily anyway, which I do with a lot of manga. But yeah, really kind of poured over this. As I say, I was just, it's the story is my kind of thing, and the artwork and the way it's told is my kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely loved this. The rating I've given this is a 9 out of 10. And it's a 5-star for me. Absolute, you know, very firm 5-star on Storygraph. This, yeah. If you're interested in Lovecraft's kind of mythos and all that kind of thing, but you don't like reading Lovecraft like me, I'd say try some of this. Try some of this if you haven't already. I know Tanabe's done other collections of Lovecraft stuff in manga form, and has got another collection coming out soon as well. So yeah, once I've finished the second volume of this, I will definitely be heading for those next. Excellent stuff. Okie dokes. What else for week 3 classic horror? Yeah, I counted these as classic. These are 2 short stories out of The Menace of the Monster, classic tales of creatures from beyond, edited by Mike Ashley, science fiction classics. So some of these are kind of more horror adjacent, I would say. And I'd got this for my birthday, and I'd only read King Kong that was in it to start with. So I picked another couple out of here to read. So the first one was Monster by John Christopher. And I picked that for several reasons. First of all, I'd already read the White Mountains by John Christopher in May as well for my science fiction stuff, which I hadn't really got on with. It was fine, but it didn't really capture me. So I thought, well, let's try a short story, an adult short story by Christopher, and see what I make of that. And I'd also picked it because I'd happened to sort of scan the first page of it and notice some stuff about sharks. Anything that references sharks and shark attacks, stuff like that, I can't resist. So I picked that up. This will go on the bingo board, by the way, as personal horror, sharks, terrified of sharks, and elemental, because it's water-based. This was really interesting. It's a weird little story, it really is. But it's amusing. It's highly amusing in part of it. It's horror. I'd say it's horror adjacent. It turned out, as I say, it could be local because actually it turned out to be set up in Scotland, near at Loch Ness, shall we say? So so yeah. Just an interesting little bit of kind of look. I was up in Scotland at the time when I was reading it, and I was like, oh, okay, it kind of is local horror as well then. But yeah, really like just strange little story, but definitely one that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed John Christopher's style in that a lot more than I did in the White Mountains. There was humour there. It felt, I connected to it a lot more. So I'm going to try some more John Christopher stories, short stories, and some of his adult novels as well, because I hear really good things about those. But yeah, good fun little story in there. And then the other one in here was Alien Invasion by Marcia Camion, not an author I'd ever heard of. The good thing about this is that there's an introduction to the author before the story. So, you know, it gives you some really good ideas of what else to read from them, and also what their background was and all that kind of stuff. And Camion, I think this was written in Alien Invasion was written in, find it, 1954. But she's quite an interesting one. She'd got a degree in journalism, and she'd done some like editing and some writing herself, and bits and pieces and stuff. And this story is one of her early ones. And then she became a reasonably successful romance author under a different name. But yeah, this Alien Invasion story is quite different from what she became more known for, I think. This one I put on the bingo board as Aliens, strangely enough, and horror adjacent, because it is horror. It's definitely horror adjacent. This was a really interesting little story. Again, I'm not going to say much about this at all, because it relies on a little bit of a twist. And it's very short. It's like 5 pages long or something like that. But it's got lots of elements to it. It's got the alien invasion element to it. It's got sort of body horror elements to it. It's got sort of romance elements to it. It's like there's a lot in there for such a short story, and that's when I really like short stories, because when somebody packs quite a lot of things that make me think within it. It's fun as well. As I say, it's got kind of a bit of a ooh factor to it, at the same time as being definitely science fiction. But yeah, really interesting. So far, this book is turning out to be a great one. I'm going to keep ploughing on with this. I've read some more short stories in it since, like this month's June. And yeah, it's great. It's a really good book. Okay, moving on. Keep cracking on. We're into week 4 now, into contemporary horror. First one for that was Horror House of Perversion by Carl John Lee, which I had through Kindle Unlimited. This is going in the extreme horror box on the bingo card. Yeah, this is quite extreme. I'd expect that from Carl John Lee. I read Psychic Teenage Bloodbath last year and had fun with that. So I thought I'd try another one of Carl John Lee's. This one wasn't as good. It was okay. It's kind of a bit of a, I don't know, kidnapping, not haunted, sort of haunted house. I don't know what you'd call it particularly, really. It's extreme horror. It is about a group of a group of folks who are having kind of a reunion. You know, former college friends, none of which particularly get on anymore, who find themselves having to take shelter in a house in the middle of nowhere. And this house is, as the title would suggest, not a nice place. So yeah, it's you know, you've got plenty of gore, you've got plenty of really nasty things happening to people, you've got some body horror in there, you've got some psychological horror in there, you've got some, you know, yeah, nasty stuff in there. Done in a fun way though. I will say that Carl John Lee, both this one and Psychic Teenage Bloodbath, they're gory and there's some really nasty stuff that happens to people, but it's, for me, it's extreme horror done in the right way. There is a tongue-in-cheek nature about it. There is enough humour there. There is enough humanity there as well to like not make it just shock value torture porn essentially. It does, you know, it does have more to it than that. But this one it just wasn't as good. It wasn't as original, I think, as Psychic Teenage Bloodbath. So I gave this a score of 6 out of 10, a 3-star. It was, I can't complain. It was a read within my subscription. It was a short read and it was entertaining for the time that it lasted. But there was not a huge amount to it, I would say. It was kind of fine across the board. There wasn't an element of it that really jumped out at me as like being something particularly good or particularly bad. It was just, you know, fine. Okay, next up, oh yes, we've got Queen of Teeth by Hailey Piper, a book that I've been meaning to get to for a long time. It's one of the ones that has been sat in my Kindle library for a long time. This is going on the bingo board under diverse authors, body horror, and also dystopian, because there is a definite element of dystopia. It is kind of set in a bit of an alternative sort of parallel timeline, if you like. Alternative history is kind of mentioned in it, and certainly a lot of the stuff in it that's kind of about the sort of big pharma and you know, the medical industry's control over you know, people's bodies, things like that. It takes that to an nth degree, and that is kind of that element of it is quite dystopian. So I'm putting it in dystopian, damn it. Yeah, this one it follows our main character Yaya, who wakes up one day to find teeth between her legs, and that develops into something else with tentacles and things. Yeah. So yeah, these things start happening and this thing develops and, you know, develops until it has a mind of its own. Yeah, I really liked this a lot. I thought this was a really, it felt like a really an original sort of story. Some great body horror in there, unsettlingly sexy at times, strange, very strange. Yeah, dark, gross, but also quite, again, human, quite moving at times. It's the relationship really between Yaya and Doc, and another sort of main character in it, and the entity that Yaya shares her body with, if you like. There's a lot to it. It's a fun, fast-paced, you know, kind of sometimes quite action-based sort of horror stuff. As I say, with some good gross bits to it. It's funny. It's definitely funny. I mean, Piper has a good sense of humour, quite dry sense of humour, also quite bonkers sense of humour at times. surreal sense of humor. It's, yeah, I really like the whole package on this. It worked for me really well. I will definitely read more Piper now I've read that one. There's some observational stuff in there that I thought was spot on, that really made me laugh out loud. So yeah, there's a lot in there to like. There really is. And I like Piper's writing. It's very straightforward. It's very accessible. But there is definitely some poetry there as well. There's some really beautifully written sections, and then there's just some, you know, some very good, quick-paced, you know, straightforward stuff. I think it's just really well constructed. So yeah, Queen of Teeth, I gave that an 8 out of 10, and that's a 4-star read. Yeah, really, really liked that. Looking forward to reading some more Piper in the future. Okay, next up we've got The Trees Grew Because You Bled There, by Eric LaRocca, which is this one. I shall whiz over this because I've already got out my wrap-up for the two Eric LaRoccas that I read in May as part of that, because that was part of my my authors project, my month with project. So I won't go into detail with these. This one has gone on the bingo board under psychological and kidnappings. There is some stuff in there about that. Yeah, as I say, if you want to know more about this one and the next one that I'll talk about, check my my wrap up for my month with Eric LaRocca, which is already out. I will link to that in the description. But generally, this one, very good overall. A couple of stories I really didn't like. 2 or 3 stories I really liked. There are 8 stories in this collection. And the rest of them were all good. You know, there's plenty in here that really made me think. I really like LaRocca's bold way of writing, bold way of thinking, and just trying stuff, getting some weird, dark stuff out there. The way he does that, I like a lot. I like the LGBTQIA+ themes that are in here. Yeah, just a really interesting collection of quite strange and very unsettling stuff. There's nothing scary in here, but there is a lot that is quite unsettling. Very unsettling in some respects. So I gave this one an 8 out of 10 and a 4-star read on Storygraph. Then we've got You've Lost a Lot of Blood, also by Eric LaRocca, which is a novella within a novella. This goes on the bingo board with for green on the cover. And again, as I say, I'll link to the description, link in the description to my wrap up for the Eric LaRocca books. This one I didn't like as much. The novella within the novella I liked a lot more than the other stuff around it. It is a portrait of a serial killer essentially, and it's all kind of his writings, poems, transcripts, sort of almost diary entries, plus the novella that he wrote, kind of mixed in with all of that. Interesting idea. I did appreciate the kind of slightly sort of the playing with form here and structure, but as I say, the novella within it was good. I enjoyed that a lot more than some of the other stuff, which kind of felt a bit pretentious, particularly the poems. Whether that was whether it was intentionally pretentious for the character's voice, or whether that's a bit of pretension in the actual writing from LaRocca, I can't make my mind up on. But yeah, just not necessarily my cup of tea particularly, although not bad by any means. I gave that a 6.5 out of 10, and that's a 3-star on Storygraph. Still worth a read, but just I prefer LaRocca's short stories, I think. Okie dokes, and then finally we've got a couple of stories that I read out of Unspeakable Horror 3, Dark Rainbow Rising, edited by Vince A. Laguno. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is a collection of unspeakable horror stories but from LGBTQIA+ authors. So you got lots of stuff in here, and I only managed to get through 2 so far for Horror Mayhem. First one was Bodies on the Dance Floor by Dan Coxon, and I read that because I knew that I was going to be attending a live stream event for a writing festival in Edinburgh, which was it was actually on science fiction, but it was one of the panel members was Dan Coxon, who is an editor and a writer, and I saw his name in the contents. All right, then I'll see what Dan Coxon's, a bit of what Dan Coxon's actually written. It's a very short story about a guy who recognises an old school friend, or not really friend, somebody he knew from school, who he was part of a gang who essentially bullied this lad for being gay, and he recognises him in a nightclub when he's incredibly drunk, and it's quite a strange sort of little speculative story, I would say. Yeah, it was okay. It was okay. It was well written in terms of the prose and stuff. It was decent. It didn't do a huge amount for me, but it wasn't bad, is what I'd say about that. It kind of left me a bit, oh, okay. And the other one that I read from that was called Incident on a Social Platform by J. Daniel Stone. I am putting this one in the techno box on the bingo card because it's kind of, a lot of it revolves around kind of an obsession with social media and becoming kind of a viral sensation and stuff like that. It's quite strange and dark and has undertones of sort of disenfranchisement and being an outsider, but the horror in it is it's unsettling again. It's not a scary thing, it's not monsters or anything like that, there's no gore or anything like that. It's psychological as well, but there's definitely the techno element in terms of technology being an influence to whether this character behaves, and the sort of darkness at play there. Yeah, I enjoyed that one actually. That was quite an interesting one, quite an interesting character exploration. Quite dark, felt quite dark, that one, and I liked the prose style. Again, quite straightforward, but there was a real nice rhythm to it. I enjoyed it. So yes, so that brings us that concludes my reading for Horror Mayhem. I managed to get through, as I say, quite a bit, and enjoyed pretty much all of it. There were no absolute duffers, a couple of excellent, and a couple of just yeah, it was fine. But not, as I say, nothing that I kind of went, oh, this is horrible, which is always good when you're doing kind of a lot of reading of short stuff. So that'll do from me today. That was quite a lot to get through. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do let me know if you've read any of the stuff that I managed to read, and what you thought of it, or any kind of recommendations you have based on the things that I've liked during my reading in May. Let me know those too. They are always appreciated. I will be back on Friday with a bit of a channel update. I need to make some changes to how I do things and what my output looks like, all that kind of stuff, because of general life things. So I will go through those on Friday. So I do hope you will join me for that then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.